Hey everybody, we're closing this unit out. It took a little longer than with the different schedules we had. But I want to quickly talk about the legacy of this event. Obviously, we talk about this being a huge event in history, U.S. world history. But what are the long-term impacts of the 4 years of World War II we've been looking at? So first, I'll tell you the human costs that are here. Okay, um, in terms of deaths here, you kind of see a little chart here. The dark red being military deaths, the kind of orange color being civilian deaths. To see how high numbers are in terms of the number of casualties everywhere. In terms of just soldiers, I mean, Soviet Union loses almost 20 million soldiers alone. The USSR has the biggest casualties of everybody here in terms of just 20 million deaths overall. We're talking, upwards of 60 million, 50, 40, 60 million people we're talking, and those numbers are even kind of iffy because we're not sure how many civilians are actually dying in all cases. The U.S. alone, some of the United States, from our point of view, it's only 400,000 casualties, 400,000 deaths in terms of the war. Yeah, it's still a lot, but compared to Soviet Union, China, Germany, so on and so forth, numbers are a lot different. I'm looking at, worldwide, we're talking about almost 21 million people are homeless refugees because of the war, and a lot of rebuilding has to happen after the war is done. In fact, you even see this little dip in population graphs where almost entire generations are wiped out in some countries because of World War II. Economically, you see how much costs happen in terms of direct war costs here. I mean, the United States, one of few very strong economic countries, that are still going yet. I mean, we have very little war damage here at home. Other countries like Great Britain, France, Soviet Union, Germany, Japan, entire cities are leveled. You know what I mean? And just talk about the money that was spent on. The United States spends $288 billion on World War II alone in terms of in terms of military, all those kind of pieces to it. So obviously we have economic numbers as well. Now the United States actually occupies Japan, and we spend a lot of money helping rebuild Japan, rebuild cities, and those kind of things. In Europe, depends on who occupied those countries. For the United States and Britain occupied, France and other countries, we try to help those countries rebuild. The Soviet Union occupied countries like modern day, like Poland and Czechoslovakia, so on and so forth. They're half of Germany. They were rebuilding their own way. Now, the Marshall Plan was a plan made by the United States. It basically gave $13 billion to Europe to help, revitalize, to help rebuild. The USSR, in any area they controlled, said no go on that money. They wouldn't allow it. And so we started seeing this tension build between the U.S. and the Soviet Union. Question of world peace. After the war, it's called the Nuremberg trials, the trials for the the Holocaust, the idea of genocide, where it's held in Nuremberg, this big Nazi stronghold. You have 24 top Nazis that are found guilty in this big, huge show trial, if you will. A big, huge trial is televised on radio and movies and that kind of stuff. And later, 113 people guilty later on. But doesn't really change the idea of genocide. Does genocide really stop? Well, there's a lot of conversation about that. You have the United Nations that comes out of the war. The United Nations is kind of the second attempt at some kind of international peacekeeping organization. The first was the League of Nations, obviously, which actually failed with World War II. And after that, we have the United Nations. So in 1945, 50 different nations, countries got together and said, okay, let's make a charter and make a way that can try, a group that can try and help organize peace and make sure wars don't happen or they don't escalate in the world. And so there's actually a Security Council that can get military force, respond to issues, and use peacekeepers. And they also had a genocide policy where the Holocaust thing never happened. It should never happen again. Here's kind of the different assembly of the United Nations. So you have what's called Secretary General. That's kind of the person that kind of the head person of the United Nations, selected from one of the member countries. There's a Security Council, which is 5 permanent members. So China, France, Great Britain, Russia, United States, kind of 5 big powers, you will, are always on a Security Council, plus 10 rotating countries from the other 191 nations that are out there. Security Council can do a lot of peacekeeping things, specialized departments, the criminal courts, those kind of things. The General Assembly is also all the nations put together. You have Economic Social Council, which is looking at the money-wise, all the money kind of parts of the world economy. You have the International Court of Justice, with 15 judges looks at issues of genocide, those kind of things. And all these different little commissions and different groups out here help with world trade, children, refugees, food, basically ways to help the world out. And so it's kind of the way that kind of the general construction, if you will, of the United Nations. In the U.S. itself, guys, the economy shifts back. During the time of World War II, you could not buy a new car. All of a sudden, over here, we see a '46 Chevy. So the factories need a little bit of time to retool, and obviously the economy takes a little bit of a dip, but then it comes back up, boom, with a fierce vengeance. And so we start seeing new cars get made, more consumer goods being made, and things that people couldn't have during the war, like chocolate and sugar, things that were being rationed, are normal again. The fact you go out and drive cars and that kind of stuff becomes normal again. Motorcycles get popular because guys were driving during the war. And so all of a sudden, things that during the war you couldn't do or you had to put away for the cause of the country start shifting back. All of a sudden, people start spending money and things start getting popular. A lot of big questions are out there. Okay, women who are working in factories before, they come back home. Do they go into the house? They keep working. So it's kind of a big question for women about women's rights, those kind of things. African Americans, they had fought for their country, they had fought the war. Now start saying, well, we saw racism. Maybe we should fight racism at home. We start seeing a little more of a civil rights push with the NAACP and some of these big questions being answered here. Internationally, the UN made the state of Israel for Jews who were escaping Europe after the Holocaust. They cut the state of Israel out of land that was already inhabited by Muslims and Christians. And started seeing some issues develop between different things over there. You also see brand new superpowers. You see the United States and you see the Soviet Union, these new superpowers that exist. And so there are two superpowers here that are very, very different. The United States is built in capitalism, so basically saying that businesses make their own decisions. They have democracies and freedoms, those kind of things. With USSR, which is communism, a state-controlled economy, and with the dictator being Stalin, obviously, who kind of controlled it with an iron fist. And the big question is, are all these new countries rebuilt from war and come out of the war? Who's their side with who? Another thing we see is the end of imperialism. African colonies are becoming free. Asian colonies are become free countries. Who's going to side with who? Who's going to go with the United States and Britain and Western Europe? Who goes with the Soviet Union? And so when we start developing what's going to be the whole next section we're looking at, which is a Cold War. Europe had a lot of problems too after the war. One of the policies that Stalin said he would allow were free elections in countries, that he would allow free leaders. It didn't happen. And Soviet-controlled countries became communist with Soviet-installed leaders. And so people start questioning, well, maybe we went from one conflict to another conflict. A lot of the countries that were controlled by the U.S. and Britain became democratic, or became at least, for the most part, democratic countries. We also see the idea of the atomic age. And so the question is now, if we saw the atomic bomb dropped on Japan, do we see it happen again? Is there a chance that if another war happens, will it be a war fought with atomic bombs? Could the United States be nuked? And eventually, the Soviet Union does create their own bomb with information they stole from us. And so a lot of these questions start coming out after the war, like, well, what's going to happen next in terms of things? I have very short notes, guys. The idea of legacy of the war here. Don't forget, guys, there are a lot of costs, both human and economic, in terms of the war. A lot of lives were lost, a lot of money used during the war. We have the United Nations out of it. We have those big questions we're going to be addressing in the years after the war. And we start seeing the superpowers develop into kind of a Cold War, if you will, between the new superpowers of the world. So we're going to leave off here. Your test will be on Friday. We're going to pick up right after that with the Cold War and how things start to change after everything. Thanks a lot, everybody. Bye.